Work, workforce, and workplace norms are shaped as much by popularized portrayals as they are by our lived experiences. From sensational headlines, like The Great Resignation, to successful series, like The Office and Silicon Valley, to skits and stories shared on our social media feeds, what we see shapes what we believe. Let's go behind the scenes to discover what's new now and next in the world of work, and we'll challenge the traditions of what it means to live well and to work well. This is Success from Anywhere.
Today on Success from Anywhere, we'll meet the author, speaker, and serial entrepreneur who is building healthier individuals and communities through innovation. Leading change doesn't have to be a tough pill to swallow, according to our next guest. Please join me in welcoming to the show John Bass, CEO and founder of Hashed Health. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Karen. Glad to be here.
Because we talk about work on the show, one question I like to ask every guest is, what was your first paying job, and how did that job inform or inspire your career trajectory?
Oh my gosh. My first job was working picking tobacco one summer in high school. Actually, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and so especially back then, this was in the early 90s. Nashville was a pretty small city, and you didn't have to go too far outside of town to find farms, and so we spent a lot of time kind of outside, and I, with a couple of friends of mine, took a farm job one summer. Man, talk about hard work. That's about the hardest, stickiest, dirtiest job you can find, picking tobacco and hanging it in the barn. And I think I did learn to work hard, and I can really attribute a lot of the success in my career to working harder than the people around me, and communicating well, and to kind of like being able to ladder up in the different jobs I had early in my career. I didn't become an entrepreneur until my mid-20s, when I just happened to stumble into a job with a startup during kind of the early e-commerce, internet, B2B stuff. So I kind of got lucky, but I think, all of that, the kind of learning to work hard, created a foundation for being able to be successful later in my career.
And being an entrepreneur, like being a farmhand, is hands-on work. I mean, you do have to roll up your sleeves and dive into the details. I'm curious, what was it about the startup world that appealed to you?
Well, I think I've learned that it took me a while to kind of figure out what I was good at, honestly. Tried a lot of different things. I taught for a little while. Did research for a while. I thought I was going to go to med school, and decided that wasn't for me. And I got into technology, and I got a job at Vanderbilt Medical Center after I decided, and that's where I kind of went when I was thinking about med school. And I decided, and I was hanging out in the division of trauma with a bunch of surgeons and doctors and nurses who really showed me what it meant to devote your life to medicine in that way. And I decided I didn't have that in me, honestly. But at the same time, I really found this interesting technology area that I wanted to focus on. This was in the late 90s, so it was right as the dot-com stuff was starting to happen. And so there was this introduction of a disruptive new technology. And I built one of Vanderbilt's first websites. I started kind of really thinking about what the internet could do for healthcare and all of the kind of processes and administrative activities around healthcare, and just became kind of obsessed with kind of how the technology could improve healthcare and drive collaboration, so that we could solve some of the problems we were having at the time. And really, that focus led me to joining a startup and working hard and kind of developing my career that laddered up to becoming a chief operating officer, well, first product manager, then chief operating officer, then CEO, and then founder of my own company. So It took a while. It took, you hear all these stories about, successful entrepreneurs who kind of have an idea in college and go start something and without a whole lot of real world experience. Well, that was not me. I didn't really become a founder and operator of startups until later in my career.
To borrow those lyrics, the long and winding road. And it makes me think of that phrase, overnight success. What we often see is that glamorized story of idea to impact being popularized as a path where the founder had such clarity, knew exactly what needed to be created, and they were on their path to success. And more often than not, for all of us, what we do to be successful is a process of discovery. And speaking of which, I'm curious what inspired you to discover and to found Hashed Health, and tell listeners more about what you do.
Yeah. So, I was fortunate to, as I mentioned, be a part of a couple startups that ultimately did well. The through line of my career before Hashed was trying to use technology to drive collaboration in healthcare. A lot of healthcare's big problems relate to just failures to collaborate. And a lot of it has to do with data sharing, multi-party kind of business process optimization, things like that. But, at the end of the day, a lot of the cost and access challenges that we see in healthcare today are just kind of collaboration issues. And so the B2B work we were doing at impacthealth.com, which became GHX, was bringing together a network of providers and suppliers to basically improve the supply chain. So rather than kind of phoning and faxing everything, we started using the internet, and we started creating these networks where all the members of the network kind of joined this flywheel of efficiency that was gained through the use of this technology. The hard part about that was not technical. It was really changing how people work together, changing the way people think about a trading partner relationship and thinking about shared value rather than losing some kind of competitive edge. And I think that's true with a lot of use cases in healthcare still today. And, then I grew up with GHX and left there after about 9 or 10 years to help start another company called Envivalink, which was around care management for orthopedic episodes of care. So how do we kind of put an envelope around the episode of care so that surgeons and their clinics and the hospital and all the people in the hospital and the post-acute providers and the patient can all kind of work together and create shared value and shared outcomes and shared economic interest and alignment. And that's a better way to deliver an episode of care, like a knee replacement or hip replacement, versus kind of everybody doing their own little thing and not talking to each other, which is the way it's kind of always been. And so that shift from kind of fee-for-service healthcare to value-based or bundled healthcare is something I focused on at that company, which we grew up and sold after about 5 years. And so I've really, because of my experience using the internet early on and bringing together networks and thinking about Michael Porter's kind of shared value principles, that's been kind of the through line throughout those companies that I was a part of. And so I started Hashed with a real focus on blockchain and healthcare, although we've kind of evolved. That's still part of what we do, but we've evolved way beyond just blockchain and healthcare. But the focus at the early stages of Hashed was using kind of this blockchain distributed ledger architecture as an operating system for collaboration and trust and transparency and incentive alignment for healthcare businesses and patients and doctors. That idea of collaboration, when I started getting into the blockchain space and the crypto space in about 2014, 2015, I really started to recognize the power of that technology and other technologies as a new framework, a new design space for solving these issues related to collaboration and trust and transparency and alignment in healthcare that I'd been wrestling with throughout my career. And so that was really kind of, I thought in 2015 that I stumbled onto a secret that no one else knew. I felt like I had found this hidden gem, and I just had to do something with it. And so I left HCA, I left Envivalink, where I was running HCA, Envivalink as a subsidiary of HCA, and started Hashed. And since then, we've just been doing a lot of discovery and delivery work in a couple different modalities, over the last 6 or 7 years. And we've evolved into a venture studio, which we're excited to now be kind of really running with hard. And it's been a blast.
Improved healthcare experience is a collaboration challenge to be solved. I love what you're saying there. And we can all relate to the experience of the feeling that doctors aren't talking to one another, or somebody prescribes a medication that interferes with something else. And we've thought to ourselves, why can't these providers all be connected so we can have the best care experience and reduce the burden on the patient to be their own advocate and a mini medical expert to get to that desired outcome of improved health? What I want to explore a little bit further, you pitched out some terms that might be newer to some of our listeners. Explain both blockchain and venture studios in a way that my soon-to-be 100-year-old grandfather could understand.
A blockchain is basically a distributed ledger. And so what that means, it's a shared database. It's what distributed means, it's shared across a bunch of different participants. And a ledger means it's just a chronological log of events or transactions or data that the network participants are all interested in. And so traditionally, like Bitcoin is kind of what people think about when they think about a crypto asset or a digital asset or something that's being tracked on a blockchain. And Bitcoin is just a packet of data that represents value to a community. And it can be tracked on this chronological ledger, so everyone knows the state of that asset. They know who owns it, and they know that it was sold from this person to this person. So what blockchain does, it enables, if there's one thing that you need to remember, blockchains enable ownership of digital assets. Okay, and so the community of people who are members of this community all understand who owns this digital thing. And that digital thing can be a cryptocurrency, or in the healthcare space, it can be a claim moving through a claims life cycle. It can be a representation of a patient moving through a episode of care. It can be a supply moving through a supply chain. It can be a lot of different things, whatever the community wants to track collectively. And so that's why I say blockchains are a great operating system for trust and transparency and alignment, is because for the first time we have these shared data structures where everyone understands what is true about a digital asset, however that's represented as a community. They're all on the same page, and there's this kind of a shared source of truth. And there's no, you can do the blockchains in different ways, but there's no, if you do a true blockchain, it's owned by the community. So there's no like third party who's abusing the members of this network. So it can be like community owned and operated, which is really interesting. So it's kind of borderless and publicly verifiable and trusted. So there's lots of different, blockchain means different things to different people, but generally that's why I became interested in it, because I started thinking about all these issues related to collaboration and data sharing, where everyone's kind of protective of their data, but we need to move this data around in order to make it meaningful and to solve these problems. And blockchain to me seemed like this really interesting new design space where we could create unique and innovative business models. And I can give you some examples of that. So that's one thing. So venture studios are a new way of innovating. It basically is what we do as a venture studio is we have ideas around how to solve big problems in healthcare. And most of the work at Hashed involves creating networks where there's need for trust and transparency and incentive alignment and data sharing in order to solve a big problem that hasn't been solved before. And there's lots of these in healthcare. And so whether we use a blockchain or not, those are the types of projects that we tend to gravitate towards. And so we have lots of ideas. They're in supply chain, they're in workforce issues, they're in payments and fintech, they're in identity and credentialing, marketplaces, data exchanges. There's lots of different kind of ideas here. And so what we do is we take those ideas and we move them through a process of discovery and delivery activities. And so every studio has a process of discovery and delivery. And the goal is to bring resources, kind of expertise to the beginning of that process so that you do a really thorough job of validating that idea before you go and waste a bunch of time and money hiring teams and raising money and recruiting advisory boards and all of this stuff that startups do. And in my career and in a lot of other people's careers, you kind of do all that really early in the process, and then you realize you don't have product market fit after you launch the company. And I think I've just gotten lucky in my career by having successes, but 90% of startups fail, and a lot of them fail because they don't understand the space they're getting into. Entrepreneurs are dreamers. They kind of fall in love with a dream and they just kind of go after it, and that's awesome, and we need that. And I do that too. But it's really important to take those dreams and validate them before you go and spend a bunch of time and resources building a company. And so studios really strive to take an idea, really validate it internally and externally, do a lot of prototyping, do a lot of business modeling, and make sure that you're not building something the world's ready for. A lot of the companies who started, for example, blockchain companies, when I started Hashed in 2016, are dead now because they went all in on like medical records on the blockchain. Versus we kind of stayed very flexible and we really listened to the market, and we only built the things that we knew were valid. And so by the time you see us, we move through kind of this process of discovery and delivery. Discovery meaning validation, delivery meaning building the product, recruiting a team, recruiting customers, recruiting investors. So by the time you see us spin out a company, we have kind of all those boxes checked. We have a backable, fundable co-founder who's going to run the company. We have customers who are going to use a product. We have a product that we know works. We have a business model that's been validated, and we have investors who are excited to support the commercialization of the new company. And so that process of discovery and delivery serves to kind of maximize the value and minimize the risk at the seed stage of a new organization. So that's what a venture studio does, at least for Hash. That's what we strive to do.
Did you know that 68% of workers say a hybrid workplace is their preference? Make hybrid work for everyone with Robin. Robin is the industry-leading flexible workplace platform for connecting people with rooms, desks, and each other. We've helped companies like Peloton, Toyota, and Hulu build better workplace experiences. Plus, we integrate with the tools you already know and love. To learn more about how we make flexible work a reality, visit www.robinpowered.com.
What I'm hearing you say is the best ideators and innovators who create viable businesses are flexible within a framework. Meaning we want to explore ideas, and there needs to be some framework in place to make sure that, to use your words, there's a ready-made market of both investors and customers to consume that idea. And often flexible within a framework begins with core values or beliefs and reconnecting with those. And you've got 6 core beliefs that are important to you. Tell us more about those.
Our kind of foundational beliefs are largely around, I'll pick out a couple that are really important. I think, there's some of these things that you see on everyone's beliefs, but the ones that I think are unique and important is this idea of radical collaboration is a big one. We think that radical collaboration is really required in order to solve the big problems that we want to solve. And we're taking big swings. We're not building, dog walking apps here. We're building things that really affect patients and really improve kind of the efficiency and decrease the cost and improve access to care for lots and lots of people. This is what we do. And so we don't think you can do that without thinking very differently and thinking via radical collaboration, new and innovative ways to bring constituents in healthcare together to solve foundational healthcare problems and create shared value through these communities and these networks. So that's one. Another one is, this kind of idea around endurance and evolution. And, there's things that I have fallen in love with, like these ideas. If you run an honest validation process, then you're going to have your heart broken because the world is just not ready for some of these really great ideas that you have. And I can think of several of these over the last 6 years where I'm like, I know this is the right thing to do. I think we should build it now. But then we did begin a validation process, and it just is hard. Either we can't find the right co-founder, or we can't get like the minimal viable network of constituents to join that network. We have one constituent or two, like for example, a pharma company is really excited, but the payer is just not even interested. And so we have to like put things on a shelf or shoot them in the head because the world's just not ready for them, and we're just not quite there yet. And so this idea of endurance and evolution is kind of like something that we think about a lot as a core value. And how do we have endurance? How do we like think very long term, but think about bridges from today's world to our dreamy futures? And how do we evolve our thinking through feedback from the market? And so a lot of it are things that you talk about a lot, Karen. It's learning mindset. It's how do you come in every day and really listen and learn and evolve your thinking and create enduring companies. And so those are a couple beliefs that I think are important to our success at Hashed, and where a lot of the decisions we make and a lot of the things we do in our process kind of fall from those core beliefs.
Thank you for bringing up mindset, because it would be so easy for people to look at a heavily regulated industry like healthcare and resign themselves to the belief that you can't evolve something, especially with technology, that's got so much regulation tied to it. And yet you're innovating in that space. And I want to come back to something that you said, which is thinking about partnerships and partnering differently. Every individual and every organization can benefit from that wisdom. How do you step back and assess the partners that you need to be successful and build the kind of compelling business case that gets them excited to participate with you, or at least show up for a conversation?
Well, I think it depends on the specific use case, and there's a difference between like B2B and B2C, and it is hard in healthcare. Like healthcare, we've been really good at kind of the status quo, and we've kind of built a model of healthcare that is working as designed. The design is, for example, if you look at the top publicly traded companies by revenue, 15 years ago, there were no healthcare companies on that list. Now there are 8. The 8 that are on there are these pretty kind of big legacy pipeline businesses. They kind of look like dinosaurs compared to the rest of the companies on like the Apples and Googles and others. And so, what I would say is all of the innovation that's been going into healthcare, and a lot of the stuff that I've done, honestly, and before Hashed, focuses on what Clayton Christensen would say is efficiency or sustaining innovations. And so all the innovation has largely gone towards making those big organizations that are focused on kind of the old healthcare world more efficient and more sustainable, and kind of reinforcing the status quo. And so that's been working, but it's also been driving up the cost of care to where we're like 20% of GDP. And so it's kind of on an unsustainable pathway. So we believe that we're entering kind of a golden age of healthcare innovation now, because costs are kind of out of control. Regulatory kind of forces are starting to really kind of drive consumerism and drive kind of employer engagement. They're driving things like the move from fee for service to value-based care, where you're changing how people get paid, which is a real driver of change. And you got the introduction of blockchain and AI and ML and all these new technologies that are enabling innovative new business models the world's never seen before. And so you have kind of this perfect storm of things going on now that in post-COVID that really you were thinking about pre-COVID, but just weren't on a real trajectory. They just weren't really moving quickly. Post-COVID, all of that stuff got accelerated. Whereas pre-COVID, you were looking at a lot of kind of, you were getting pulled more towards efficiency and sustaining innovations. Post-COVID, there is more of an appetite for partnering with even big organizations around disruptive innovation. People are waking up to the fact that what's happening is not sustainable, and there are these macro trends that are accelerating and they kind of need to get on board. And so collaboration has always been hard in healthcare. Partnering between, only like 15% of innovation initiatives at healthcare enterprises are successful. I mean, most of them, they just go there to die. And so don't have a great track record of especially disruptive innovation in healthcare. But we feel like over the next decade, that's really starting to change. And there's a real thirst for doing things differently. And there's all these drivers of that. So I think it's taken a lot of years off my life, this focus on collaboration in healthcare. But I think, we're kind of hitting our peak right at the right time, where we think there's enormous opportunity for thinking more collaboratively and more in a partnership and network mindset than even a couple of years ago.
We are entering the golden age of healthcare. I love that thought. What is the most transformative trend in the future of healthcare that we should all be watching right now?
Well, I think it's hard to pick one just because, like I said a few minutes ago, there's so many exciting things. The introduction of technology and kind of these regulatory changes around how people are getting paid, and the ability to take risk and move to value, and the kind of the trend towards consumerism. At the end of the day, I think things that empower the consumer are going to change healthcare the most. And so if you think about the technologies that empower consumers, it's your mobile phone, it's mobile devices, it's bringing AI to the decision-making process for patients. It's arming and equipping patients with their data and their medical identity, and allowing them to kind of be more active and accountable participants in their care. And so, that's not one thing. That's kind of this blending of AI and mobile and lots of different things. But I think just generally, I think healthcare probably won't change a lot until the consumers are truly empowered. And then all of a sudden you'll see kind of a lot happening at once. And I think that's part of what's starting now.
Power of healthcare. It's in all of our hands. And speaking of all of us, John, a segment we like to do on the show is the virtual water cooler, because people say they miss these spontaneous interactions and, the break rooms and the water coolers. So this segment is designed to be 5 quick questions where I'll ask you something and you say the first thing that comes to mind to help us get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
I think so.
People are like, I find this terrifying because I have no idea what you're going to say. It's like a horrible word association game. You're afraid I'm going to say something and your first response will be like, I wish I could unsay that.
All right,
this should be an easy one for you as a serial entrepreneur. What time of day do you do your best work?
7 a.m.
Speaking of time, now imagine every day has 25 hours rather than 24. What are you going to do with your extra hour?
Hopefully hang out with my children. I have 3 daughters, and I'm really enjoying them right now.
That's awesome. And I'm sure they'd love another hour with you.
I hope so.
If you had to eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Tacos.
Oh, you and Jake Miller from Engineered Innovation Group share that.
I knew I liked Jake.
He's an awesome, awesome leader.
Yeah.
Now imagine the zombie apocalypse is coming. Who are the 3 people you want on your team?
Oh, I mean, I immediately thought about my family. Yeah, I'd have to go with that, I guess.
Great answer. And how can listeners learn more about you and your company and stay connected with what you're discovering?
I think, we try to do a good job innovating in the open and talking pretty openly about the things we're working on. We think talk is pretty cheap, but it's really the ability to execute on things that is hard. And so we don't take ideas. We don't kind of hold ideas too close. We think by sharing that information, it helps bring community and resources to each of the initiatives that we have in the studio. And that's how we find, partners and co-founders and supporters. And so, I think we try to use our website. We've got a great VP of marketing named Stacy Palicki, who is helping us really kind of improve how we do that. And so I really think the best way is to follow our website, subscribe to our newsletter, and then I tend to post everything on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is kind of the primary social outlet where you'd see what we're up to.
Awesome. Well, thank you to John Bass, founder and CEO of Hashed Health, for joining us today on Success from Anywhere. Because success is not a destination, success is not a location, success is available to anyone, anytime, anywhere. Thanks for listening.
If you could, wanna hear